Excellent. I think we can start. My name is Kasia Janitz-de-la-Rue, and I'm delighted to see so many of you here in this session, and even more delighted to see the range of countries that you are listing here that you come from. I think we're covering the whole world, really. It's amazing, and it must be very different times of the day for you as well, which I am very impressed with. Fantastic. Okay, so let's move. Today we will be talking about hybrid learning a year later because it's been a year since we started working in this strange way, but also a year later because we talked about hybrid learning last year in Pearson spring days as well. I would like to start by having a look at this quote from a report by UNICEF, which is really giving us a summary of what is happening in education at the moment. And I'll read it out. It says, we are facing a COVID-19 education crisis. As this report finds, schools for more than 168 million children globally have been closed for almost a full year. With every day that goes by, these children will fall further behind, and the most vulnerable will pay the heaviest price. This really is very straightforwardly said that school closures have an awful effect on children around the world. And obviously they do need to be closed with the pandemic, but the impact on children is huge. And we thought a year ago that the impact on children would be huge because a lot of children are sort of lost to learning and disappear because they have no connectivity or no equipment. But actually, as time goes by and a year in, it seems that even those dedicated students, even for them, it might be too much at the moment, that they are beginning to struggle with learning, that they are beginning to struggle with their motivation, that they are being distracted, that they are maybe getting depressed. And some of them even might be fearing the return to school because they know that they have fallen behind, and they fear integration with children, and they fear that their lack of learning will have been revealed. So the situation is really very difficult. And this is why I would like us to talk about what we can do about this, and I'll be focusing a lot about building connections as well. But before we move on to the investigation of hybrid learning, I would like us to sort of think back to a year ago and when schools first closed. Do you remember what your biggest and immediate worry was a year ago? If you could put your responses into chat, we'll see, hopefully, if you remember a year ago what your key concerns were. Yes? Knowing what to do with technology, how long it will last, teaching online, losing students, technology, teaching online, money, tech, health, Zoom, uncertainty, fear of technology. You're going so fast, I'm not able to read, but I think a lot of it is around technology and some around uncertainty and health. Yeah. That seems to be very much, yes. And some of you say, how long will it last? I think nobody thought last year that it would last for as long as it has so far, because it has been over a year, and we still don't know how long it will last. Thank you very much for these answers. So this was a year ago. When I was thinking about what we might want to talk about today, I thought that these would be the three key areas to cover. One is technology, which a lot of you mentioned was our key concern a year ago. And that means, how do we actually deliver the lessons? Another one is methodology. How do we adapt our teaching to the teaching online, to the hybrid teaching? And the third one, I call broadly engagement. How do we keep the students motivated? And we thought briefly about how we felt a year ago. I would like us to think now what you think is the biggest challenge for you now, And I would like to ask Charlie to help us and organize a poll for us so that you could vote actually and decide which of these do you think is the biggest challenge for you now? I hope you can vote now. I can see that some of you are voting also in chat, and there's a lot of votes for engagement. Yeah. Motivation, some methodology, some technology. So there's quite a good mix. I can see that you're still voting in two ways, both in the poll and in chat. I'm going to wait just a few more minutes because I can see that the number of votes in the poll is still going up relatively fast. So we'll give people a chance to cast a few more votes in the poll as well. Okay, I think the voting has now slowed down in the poll. And I will, now that I say slow down, people started voting a little bit again, but we have now reached 50%, and suddenly 56%. So obviously we're experiencing some issues with connectivity as well. Do you think we can close the poll, Charlie, and see the result?
The results are showing now, Kasia.
Okay. I do not see the results somehow yet, but
Okay, would you like me to read them out?
Yes, please.
We've had a total of 56% of the people have voted. 7% of those said that technology was an issue. 11% of those said methodology was the issue, and the remaining 37% have said engagement was the issue.
Thank you. That is very consistent with what we've heard in the chat as well. So that makes sense, doesn't it? That it is both results are consistent. Thank you very much for your help. I will cover all three areas because I'm sure there is, even though you're all experts in technology at the moment, I'm sure that we can still mention a few ideas that might be helpful to some, and we will try and focus on all three anyway. Okay. In terms of where we are with technology and what might be helpful still in terms of how we can use technology to address all the issues, really, I would like to start quickly by mentioning what we mean by hybrid learning, because it does have different guises in different countries, in different schools, and even in the same school at different times. So we have situations sometimes when students take turn in having lessons in person or remotely. So we could have group one going to school in person in week one, and then group two would be at home, and then in week two they would swap, and there would always be half of the children at school. This does happen sometimes. Students of key workers are at school, but the rest are at home is another scenario. Or all students are at school except for those self-isolating. So these are different options, different scenarios that you might have, or you might have just schools completely closed and teaching everyone online. That is still a very common scenario as well. I think when it comes to a situation where you have students in two locations, that is particularly challenging, of course, because it sort of adds an extra dimension to teaching online. First of all, we need to make sure that face-to-face students and remote students get a similar learning experience. And there are several different ways you can do that, of course. One approach would be that you might want to present to the class or to the children who are present in the class and record this for the children who are at home. And another approach might be that everyone, including the children who are in the class, might be using technology. And then they are using the same platform. Even if they are in the class, they sit in front of their devices and they're using the same platform. Another challenge that we are facing when we're teaching children in two different locations is that we need to make sure that both groups get a similar amount of attention. And it can be a little bit difficult sometimes because we can either have our attention drawn to the children in the class who are obviously, we can see their whole bodies, they are very close to us, so they immediately attract our attention. But similarly, if we're teaching everyone using a platform, we can be getting lots of chat messages from children at home, and that can also distract us and focus us more on the children who are at home. So teaching two groups at the same time does require these extra skills and this extra reflection. Am I giving them the same level of teaching, the same amount of attention? But possibly another key area, possibly even more challenging, is to ensure that there is interaction between the two groups. And I'll be talking about this interaction and returning to the importance of interaction throughout today's meeting, because I really think that a lot of the issues that we have as teachers and students have at the moment, and a lot of you mentioned mental health and as well in the chat, is related to the fact that we no longer maintain the contact that we used to when we all went to school. So making sure that the whole class manages to interact, even though some children may not be able to meet for quite a long time, and some consistently may be in school, whereas others consistently may be at home, is an additional challenge. And possibly using technology with the whole class is actually making it easier, because if everybody is using the same platform all the time, they can all interact using chat messages, or you can put them into breakout rooms, and they're all on the same page and on the same foot. So that is one idea. Another challenge, of course, relates to technology. Someone mentioned here that you still have problems with connectivity, and quite likely if you had them a year ago, they can continue. So if you're teaching groups of children both face-to-face and remotely, and you want them to have the same learning experience, it is always a good idea also to have a plan B, and to have a deck prepared, or a deck with a voiceover, or a recording of yourself that you can post in case some children are not able to join, or the internet drops off in the middle of the lesson. I think one thing to remember all the time is really, by deck I mean a PowerPoint presentation. One thing to remember is that it always is helpful to you and to the children to keep things simple. If you choose just a few platforms or applications and everybody knows how to manage them, it is a lot easier to switch between them without getting everybody lost. So sometimes really less is more, and it's good for you to sort of narrow down what you're doing rather than have extra challenges. I would like to just go over a few functions available in all your platforms, and just to sort of drop some ideas of how these functions might be used in teaching. You all probably have platforms of your choice by now that your schools or your countries have decided to go with. I just wanted to remind you that if you don't, Zoom is now integrated into the Pearson English portal. So you can schedule classes from your dashboard. And I need to move on to the right slide for you. And but the lesson is automatically added to your and your students' schedule in the portal. And you can launch the sessions directly from the portal. The Zoom account will be the Zoom account that you have. So if you have an account that is free, then lessons will only be able to last for 40 minutes. But if you have a paid account, then they can last as long as you want, obviously. So that's just to remind you that Zoom is available in the Pearson English portal. And now moving on to the functions that I mentioned we would go over. So one function that is available in most platforms is sharing a screen. And of course, if you're using, if you're running your lessons online, you can present your screen to present slides with new language. You can show images to explain vocabulary. You can play videos on a video channel. You can display text for students to complete comprehension tasks, or you can show a student's written work to discuss it in a one-to-one scenario. And I'm sure you're doing a lot of these already, because this is a really useful and simple tool that allows you to change what you're doing in the lesson and to really add variety. Because if you look at all of these points, if you were to do a few of them in the lesson, that does add the variety to the variety of tasks you have in the lesson. So that's sharing a screen. Another function that is really quite useful is a whiteboard function, which you also have in most platforms. If you do not have it, there are also some free whiteboard functions that you can guess outside of your platform. And you can use this whiteboard in exactly the same way as you would in the classroom with a normal whiteboard. So you can write things on it, you can type, you can highlight, you can change color. And you can also invite students to write, which again means that it can be quite a fun thing and simple tool to use, but also quite a fun tool to use if a lot of participants or all of the participants can express their ideas or add to the vocabulary pool. For example, if you're eliciting vocabulary, add to the ideas. If you're brainstorming, it can really be quite a nice tool to add again to the variety of your lessons. So that's the whiteboard. And another one is, of course, Chatbot, Chatbox, which we have been using so effectively so far already. So I'm sure that you are using Chatbox all the time in your lessons very successfully. And here are just some ideas what you can do with Chatbox. You can, of course, elicit answers to questions, which is what we've been doing already today. You can get answers to an exercise. You can ask students to produce an example sentence. You can brainstorm and share ideas and opinions, which is sort of happening here as well. You're giving everybody a lot of ideas as we go along. You can provide corrections to errors. We're not doing that today. And you can also allow students to ask questions, which of course is easier than letting 20 students or even 30 speak in the class. And above all, it does allow the class to bond. So if students are not able to meet, but they are able to use the chat function to talk to each other, that does help them feel that they are a big group and they are working together. We are a much bigger group than any class, and we also feel that we are here together because we are sharing this information, where we're from and what tools we're using. So obviously for a class it has a much stronger impact. One sort of difficulty that you might face if you're teaching very young learners, of course, is that they might not be able to write or read fast enough to cope with this as a tool that enables them to work during the lesson. But at the same time, once they do master reading and writing, it is a fantastic new context for practicing reading and writing that we didn't really have before. Normally in the past in the class, they would practice speaking and you would make sure that they ask questions in English. Now they can practice reading and writing, and that is quite a wonderful new tool as well. I can hear my cat meowing desperately in the background. I hope that doesn't impact your audio. And the next function that I wanted to mention is breakout rooms. Breakout rooms are a little bit difficult, perhaps, because a lot of us might feel slightly uncomfortable about putting students into breakout rooms and not being sure what they are doing there. I mean, with speaking activities, I think we're all quite comfortable putting children or students, I keep talking about children because I specialize in young learners, so forgive me, putting students into groups or pairs and letting them speak. And then you can walk around the classroom normally in normal life and hear what they're doing. If you put them into a breakout room, then you kind of lose control over what they're doing. However, I still think it is a good idea to try that. All you need to do is really think of a clear task that they have to bring back. So, for example, if they have to decide about something or write something or choose something, or maybe even do an activity that is a writing activity in the print book, but together and check it together, then they need to bring something back to the class. And even if you risk that for a few minutes they will not speak English when they are together, they will have to produce something in English and take it back. So that will work very well. Give them a dialogue, give them a speaking activity, but make sure that there's something that they need to bring back and show to you. And another and final comment I would like to make about using technology is the need to set tasks in a very clear way. After a year of sitting in front of the screen for the whole day, they are probably suffering from a Zoom fatigue, which is a term used for all meetings, fatigue really. And it's quite likely that if you tell them things, they might not register because it is very easy to get distracted in an online lesson. So it is even more important than it would be in a normal classroom to pass on the message in several ways. Ideally, show them the visual, write, and say. And if you use all three, hopefully one of these methods will get through to them. So really key to set tasks in a very clear way. And if you are dealing with young learners also, there's a need to communicate with their parents in a very clear way on top of that. So that's just a quick run through technology. I don't want to bore you with details on technology because as you've all mentioned, technology was a big issue a year ago. We have moved on and we have many other issues now. So I would like us to spend some time looking at these other issues. And one is how to tweak our lessons so that they are more suitable for teaching online. And that's our next topic here. I would like us to have a look at how we can use print course books to teach an engaging online lesson. But let us think briefly what we actually mean by effective remote learning. What makes a good lesson, irrespective of how it is delivered? If you have any ideas what the answer might be to this, please put them in the chat box. What do you think makes a good lesson? Interaction. That is a very good answer. Fun. Forget that it's online. Good fun. Engagement. Clear goals. Both. Active involvement. Lots of fantastic answers. Really great. Yes. So there's a lot there about engagement, communication, fun, interaction. It's about being with other human beings, isn't it? Yes. Collaboration. Yes. Lots of answers to this effect. Exactly. I think that is very, very true. And I think this is all spot on. So we do need, and sense of achievement. Yes, exactly. Thank you for that. We need to make sure that students feel that we're all together, don't we? And therefore we do need to change the way we teach quite a lot during the lesson, and use different modes of engaging students. I would like us to think about it by looking at a particular example, just because it's easier. Maybe it's easier, hopefully it's easier. And this example is a lesson that comes from Team Together, Level 3, Unit 1. I would like us to have a look at it activity by activity, and look at it from the point of view, okay, what is happening in this lesson and how we might cover it in an online lesson so that we get all the things that you've mentioned. And just in case you cannot see it in a lot of detail, I'm going to tell you what is happening in this lesson very quickly. So we have the introduction of the topic on the left, and finding out what students know already, checking what vocabulary they know. And then we have vocabulary presentation and practice, first written and then spoken. And then in the end, children do a speaking task. And what I would like to suggest is that we look at this lesson from the point of view of stages of the lesson, which I have sort of listed here on the right, and then try and think how we might tackle them online in a way that works best. So if you look at these stages, we have hello, objective setting, warm up, presentation, practice, production, objective review, homework setting, and goodbye. There's some, of course, that will immediately appeal to you as stages that you can do as activities that allow students to work together, as activities that allow you and the students as a whole class to work together, and also at stages where you can introduce something that isn't either print or digital, but something else that adds to the engagement. So I'm sure you already have some thoughts. I'll show you the ideas that I came up with, which of course do not have to be the best ideas. You might have better ones, but this is what I thought, that we do want to have a moment when we engage with the whole class, and ideally that would happen at hello and goodbye stages. We do want to have a moment when we give students absolute clarity on what is happening. That will probably be objective setting and homework setting and objective review. We want to have a stage when we're bringing in something that isn't print or digital, possibly, if we can, and that could be presentation, that could be warm up, depending on where we go. And we do want to have a stage where children can work together, and that ideally would mean the production stage, right, where we can put them into groups or pairs. So this is how I thought it might work. And of course, you might have your own ideas. It's just a way of looking at a lesson in a book and sort of trying to pull out what different approaches we might use to engage students in different ways. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. These examples that I'm giving here, those visual examples that I'm giving here, come from the presentation tool. The presentation tool is available for every Pearson course, but you might not have it. And in this case, we can talk anyway about how to introduce this stage during the lesson. It doesn't matter. It's just a helpful tool to have. So to start with, we will be looking at the introductory stages, which are hello and objective setting. Hello, as I mentioned, it is this one of these moments when you can establish contact with the whole class. And it really is very important to establish this contact with the whole class. As we've mentioned already, this human connection and human interaction is what we're really missing, all of us, students and teachers alike. And this is one of those moments when it comes easy and natural. We can exchange a few comments in chat box about how we're feeling and what we were doing at the weekend. And I do appreciate that many schools are behind with material, and it may seem like a waste of time, but it isn't actually, because it's addressing this very deep need that we all have to connect. It is a good investment. So hello is an important stage to have as a whole class, ideally with cameras on, and I do appreciate that there are many different sensitive scenarios, and some students may have difficult circumstances at home, and you may want to protect them actually from switching their cameras on. But if it is only possible, try and find some time when you can all see each other and talk. This is really quite important for everybody's well-being. And objective setting, I think this is even more important than before, that students who, as we said, can be easily tired or distracted looking at a Zoom for the whole day, do actually have this moment at the start of the lesson and at the end of the lesson when they're shown, this is what we're learning today, this is what you have learned today. So I think it is really important to have it up in front of their eyes. And you know, if you're using a presentation tool, you have it as part of the lesson. But if not, you can just scribble it on the whiteboard, just like you would in the classroom in the past. So that is an important tool to use. Moving on, we would then usually have a warm-up in the class, and the suggested presentation tool is that you would have this activity that you can see. Children are looking at the picture and they are talking about how many lessons they can see in the picture and what words related to school they know. You can use it like this, but you can also ask your students to look at the print books and see if they can find any words. You can ask them to put these words in chat box. You can ask them to add words onto a collaborative space like a whiteboard. So there are many different ways you can tackle this, irrespective of what material you use. And it is another opportunity for some collaboration and for sort of speaking together as a whole class. The next stage, I think, is also quite important and can be done in an interesting way, because this is presentation. And of course, you can use the book for presentation, you can use an ebook for presentation, and you can use this activity from the presentation tool as well. But you can also, especially if you're teaching young learners, introduce good old flashcards in here. And that does bring another dimension to the classroom. It's no longer looking at the PowerPoint, no longer looking at the screen, but introducing something more real life. And I think especially now, after a year of looking at screens, we shouldn't be ashamed of using those real objects or real picture cards, flashcards, because that allows you also to introduce something different to the class. It's not all interactive, but you can show them a card and say, this is a classroom, and you're showing them a picture of the teacher and they have to react in some way. You can turn it into a little game, which is slightly different. And another key thing is that this allows you also to make sure that this stage of the classroom is different. Of the lesson is different, that sometimes you use flashcards, sometimes you use an interactive activity, and sometimes you can use some objects which you have in your flat or in your house. So again, there is this variety which helps with engagement. So that's the presentation stage. For the practice stage, again, we can use interactive activities, and we can use interactive activities provided by the course that we do together, provided by the course that students do individually. You can also get students to do activities in their print books and then get together and look at the answers. You can look at the ebooks together. There's a number of different things you do here, and you can also, of course, include other platforms that you have to hand. It is important that this stage does give students enough time for practice, and that it is staged as you would always do it in the classroom, from more controlled, easier to sort of more independent activities of different types. We would then move on to production. And I mentioned earlier that it is quite a good idea to use breakout rooms, even if we may feel that the students might not always speak English if we leave them to it, but it's worth a risk. And this activity is actually a very good example of an activity that might work well in a breakout room, because in case you can't read it, I will say what it involves. The students have to ask two partners about the subjects they like, and they have to write a sentence about each partner. So if you send 3 students into a breakout room, and even if they spend some time speaking their own language, they will bond and they will meet, which in itself is a good thing nowadays. But secondly, at the end of the meeting, they will still have to leave with those written sentences that they will bring back to the class. So they will still do a task in English. So that is a good example of how a breakout room might actually work for you. And finally, at the end, we return to the objective review. I mentioned at the beginning how of this sort of imaginary lesson we're going through, how useful it is to have this objective presented to the students at the beginning. It is equally useful to have it mentioned again at the end of the lesson. And the approach that would work really nicely is to quickly check also and show them how much they have learned, so that they feel the sense of achievement at the end, and that they are reminded that they came to the classroom not knowing so many words, but now they do know more words, or they do know some more language, and that they have achieved something. And that really helps them focus as well. And of course, goodbye is another moment for contact with the rest of the class, which is quite key. Moment when you can praise students for what they have done, and everybody can say goodbye to the whole class, either verbally or in a chat, to have some kind of a sense of closure, but also to end on a high note, to make them feel good about the lesson, which is also quite important these days, that students feel good. And when it comes to setting homework, you can, of course, use print homework or online activities that may come with your course. But as I mentioned earlier, quite important to have the homework shown to students, described verbally, but also leave some written note of what it is that they need to do. And of course, with young learners, send a note also to parents, either by email or using a school platform, whatever way of communicating with parents you have. So these are just a few things that you can sort of do quite simply when you're switching from using your usual print book to teaching online. It's basically using largely the same material, but thinking about how we can use it in the class, so that we have some work done together as a class, some work in groups, some work more sort of, even though online, but still students interacting, and maybe switching from print to online, using some objects, some realia, to make the lesson more varied and give it a more interesting pace. I would like us to move on to engagement now, which is the sort of last big section I would like to talk about, which I think we have all agreed is one that everybody is struggling with most at the moment. Engagement has been getting low over the last few months for all of us, and for students in particular. So it is a very important topic. And obviously, for both students and teachers, one of the key reasons for feeling low during the pandemic is this lack of contact. And I found this research, which was very interesting, I thought. This was UK-based research showing that 39% of teachers prefer live lessons, and only 19% prefer pre-recorded lessons. And you can find it a little bit puzzling, because, you know, if you're doing live lessons, there's kind of more that can go wrong in many ways, as more of a risk. But at the same time, what gives us this interaction with the class. This is why we love teaching, right? It's because you love teaching because you can interact with other people, and exactly that gives you this contact with the students. That's what school is about. And for students, similarly, I think you're all agreeing here. For students, similarly, school is about meeting their friends. It's about interaction. So it's not really that surprising if you think about that. In a face-to-face situation, this engagement comes from interaction that we have in the class. And in a live lesson, this can be a little bit more difficult. But as we said, it is quite important to dedicate some time every lesson to interaction, and ideally have some time when students can have their cameras on and they can all look at one another and you can engage as a whole class. Sometimes it can be difficult for students to have their cameras on, but maybe it is possible, if they cannot do it in every lesson, maybe it is possible to agree that every Monday for the first 10 minutes, you switch your cameras on, or have some kind of an agreed moment like this for which students can somehow prepare, hopefully, and you can have some kind of a meeting where people can see one another and interact. I have mentioned already cloud-based solutions to create collaborative spaces, even if it's just a whiteboard or a shared document where people can put their ideas and brainstorm. All of this can help. But also engaging learning experiences, bringing into the classroom a variety of tasks, which is what I've been talking about for the last however many minutes we've been together, is also quite important. And that does increase students' motivation in the lesson. How can we ensure the variety of tasks? This is a question I would like us to ponder on for a little while. When it comes to online, it is a good idea, if you have young learners especially, to have some movement breaks. And you can introduce movement breaks in a very gentle way. If your students can have cameras on, of course, which may not be true for all of you, you can have a system agreed with them that they can signal to you with their arms, for example. And then they get a little bit of exercise as they say yes or no, or they can stand up if they agree. All of this helps them move about, which we know is a big issue at the moment. You can also introduce songs and videos. Songs work best with younger students. Videos work very well with everyone, to ensure that they have different modes of teaching during the lesson. If you have young students and you have songs, you can also encourage them to dance, jump about to the rhythm. That is going to be very good for their well-being, but also for the amount of attention they can give to the rest of the class. Giving students choices is another good way of engaging them. And of course, that they have to be wise choices, of course, just like in parent terms, it would be a choice between eating broccoli and peas. You can give them a choice of singing a song about animals or singing a song about clothes, for example, or doing an activity maybe in the print book or online. And then they feel more ownership and they feel more empowered and they feel that it's their activity a lot more. So you can go down this route as well. You can play interactive games. We do have interactive games with some courses and also on the PrePrimary Academy. So you can use that and they are really quite nicely interactive. If you have the technology and the tools, that is another thing to look into and break the routine with that. You can keep lessons short and compact. I know that in some countries there have been government regulations to keep lessons a little bit shorter so that especially young students do not get exposed to too much screen time. So that's another consideration. And make lessons as multisensory as you can. So introduce many different modalities. Get the students to do things with their hands, to sing, if possible, to speak, to move, as well as click. And that really does help online. In terms of offline activities, especially with young learners, we should remember that there's no harm in doing some coloring, drawing, projects and hunts, and that they all really help. I have two examples here. They both come from PrePrimary Academy, and you have some examples. In fact, I think one of them did go in to your goodie bag as well. One is creating a project which is Milk Carton City, and you can, if you're talking about buildings in a town, you can ask each child to do a building of a different type. So one children can do a bank, another one can do a swimming pool, another one can do a school. If they send photos in, then you can put them into onto a whiteboard or into a collaborative space, and you can create a whole town which has been created by the whole class, even though the class cannot meet, which is really a lovely idea, I think, for the children to see communal work, even though they have to do their bits independently. And different hunts, and then the poster that the second activity that you have here is for a rainbow hunt. So you ask students to check around their house, their flat, for objects which they can use to make a rainbow. And they can either draw this rainbow or take a photograph of this rainbow. And it can be crayons and pencils and toys and food and whatever they find. It's a way of getting them moving. It's a way of getting them think critically and creatively. And they can, and it can result with a lovely craft activity. Why am I talking about ensuring that there is this variety of tasks? Because we're not really teaching just English. We're also teaching creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, motor skills. I'm thinking about young learners, of course. And it is important to remember that we're teaching all of this. And when we're in a normal classroom situation, face-to-face, we always focus on all of these aspects. But with moving to online learning, with limited time, with having to fit in all the material into these lessons and manage technology, we sometimes forget that we have to focus on all of these other aspects of children's, students' development as well. And it is really quite key to remember that we need to develop these as well. And sometimes we need to think about things that go beyond a simple online lesson. Not that simple online lessons are actually simple. And with that in mind, it is also quite useful to focus on helping children to learn to learn. A lot of teachers, especially from secondary schools, are complaining that students may be cheating, may not be working hard enough. And it is a good idea to help them to understand right from early years that they do take responsibility for their own learning. And that it's useful for them, in order to achieve this, it is useful for them to reflect right from the beginning on their own progress. And we can encourage this in a very simple way in every lesson, highlighting their learning behaviors, thinking about how they learn best. So if you go through this objective review in the end of the lesson, you can encourage them to think about how many words you have learned. Think about how you learned these words. Was it easy when we were singing, or was it easy because you were doing this speaking activity in a breakout room? How do you learn best? What helps you? How much have you learned today? If you haven't learned so much, why was that? Are you feeling tired? And to constantly think about these things and reflect so that they really understand how they are learning and how they are making progress and when they are making progress. So when they get a little bit older, then they know how to take responsibility for their own learning, and they do understand that it's in their own hands and for their own benefit that they learn. So that's another message I wanted to pass on in terms of trying to engage students. We don't have an awful lot of time left, but I wanted to touch upon one more thing very, very briefly, and that is your own well-being. I know that a couple of my colleagues have separate sessions on well-being and self-care, and I know that every single poll that I have looked at recently shows that teachers are struggling because there's so much more work this year than before. And your workload is on the increase. There's a lot more preparation that has to go into the daily lessons, but there's also a lot more effort put into chasing students who are missing, communicating with parents, and you really need to look after yourselves. It's this old analogy. If you're on a plane and you want to help a child, you need to get oxygen first before you give oxygen to the child. It's the same in family life, and it's the same in a teacher-student situation. You need to look after yourself. So try and think if there is anything that you can do to make your life easier. And some of the simple suggestions that I have come up with is really try and engage with your peers, with your teachers from your school, and learn from each other's tips, but also create a pool of resources. And if you have some resources that you can share, is it a recording of yourself or some videos that you've found, something that people can use as a backup plan on a day when everything goes wrong? That is very, very helpful. And you can use these also as flipped classroom, especially with older students. All of these resources that anybody at the school has created can be pulled together. And also there are resources that are already pulled together, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can just use them. And one such example is the Primary Academy and the PrePrimary Academy that you will have access to if you're using Pearson courses, where you can find already made grammar PowerPoint, songs, videos, topical packs, those interactive games that I mentioned. They're all there, and you can just use them, and you don't have to create things that are already existing. I don't want to run over, so I'm sort of going fast, but I just wanted to invite you to join us for a coffee break where we can talk and you can ask some more questions. There's a couple of coffee breaks, one tomorrow, one the day after, and you're very welcome to join. I don't know if anybody has any questions still today. If you do, I'll try and answer them. If not, thank you very, very much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope you found some of the things I suggested helpful. Thank you very much indeed.